Mom and Dad's house.
Devastating scenes of destruction inside the historic town site of Jasper, Alberta. Homes leveled, cars burnt to shells. We're just down the highway to the entrance to Jasper National Park, where tonight fires are still burning. Overnight, a wall of flames 100 meters high, moving kilometers in just minutes.
Flames started getting closer and trees are starting to burn, grass is on fire.
A national treasure in Canada's Rockies, forever changed.
We share the sense of loss with all of those who live in the town.
The damage, the determination to rebuild.
Tonight, here in Paris, on the eve of the Olympic Games, a cheating scandal hangs over Team Canada.
And there is the whistle.
A win on the pitch, but off, questions swirl.
No matter how they performed this Olympics, as defending gold medalists, they've lost.
And later, how the planning for these games started amidst tragedy.
We have to move on. We can't let terrorists or terrorism win.
The pride and resilience of Paris.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault and Ian Hannah-Mansing near Jasper, Alberta.
We are at a police roadblock just down the highway from Jasper National Park. This is as close as we can get to the Jasper town site. It's not just a piece of Canada's identity, but Jasper is also a World Heritage Site, now devastated by wildfire. This was a vibrant neighborhood, but as the two fires moved in and merged, many of these homes were no match for the fast-moving flames. Alberta's premier says potentially 30 to 50% of the town suffered damage. Parks Canada confirms several buildings were lost, but says it's not safe yet for a detailed assessment. Back inside town, fires are still burning, crews are still fighting. Sam Sampson shows us all efforts are aimed at saving as much of Jasper as possible.
Far back, as you can see, that side of the street they had sprinklers. Everywhere else, nothing but chimneys standing.
Ash, rubble, and metal. Debris that just a day ago were businesses, trees, homes.
There's Mom and Dad's house.
Video emerging from inside the town site, verified by CBC News. Some neighborhoods virtually gone, while others seemed untouched by fire. Two fires were within kilometers of the town all day Wednesday. Crews kept fighting until winds suddenly picked up and turned on them. Embers rained down, and within minutes, it breached town limits.
So that's kind of what you're dealing is just a monster at that point. There is no tools we have in our toolbox to deal with that at that point. You get out of the way, you retreat, and you do what you can to protect communities and infrastructures.
That's what Tristan Strong was trying to do. He was transporting water to fight the fires when the flames moved in. He says he and others took refuge in a cinder block building, forced to watch Jasper burn.
Watching it all happen, listening to the explosions of propane tanks, and God knows what was happening behind the scenes, but all you could hear was kaboom, kaboom, kaboom.
He escaped and wants to return.
Just wanting to get back and go try and save what I can.
This is as close as we can get to Jasper. This is the entrance on the eastern side of the national park. Pretty busy, as you can see. You have people coming in and out. If you're not authorized, you're not getting in there. And even kilometers away from the town, you could still smell and taste the smoke from the fire. It's not clear exactly how many buildings burned, but Parks Canada says the damage is concentrated on the west side of town. The hospital, schools, and the wastewater treatment plant were protected. But into the night, crews from dozens of municipalities were still working to help put out fires. The scale of the loss shocking for the premier.
And so although those of us who experience Jasper as visitors can't imagine what it feels like to be a Jasperite right now, we share the sense of loss. Jasper, we will continue to stand by you.
Sam, it's cool, it's been raining, and no doubt that's helping firefighters.
Absolutely. Parks Canada is saying that, yes, This weather has subdued fire activity, but it's not enough to really put out the fires themselves on its own. So, of course, crews are still working on fires inside the town and that merged fire that's in the national park.
As you mentioned in your piece, critical infrastructure has been saved. What more do we know about what's been damaged, what hasn't been?
Well, when you think Jasper, you think tourism. And so we do know at least one family-owned hotel burned to the ground. The Fairmont-owned Jasper Park Lodge, it did suffer some fire damage, but they say their main structures are intact. We're also looking at bridges. If you've ever been on the Icefields Parkway, that main road that tourists go from Jasper to Banff, they're looking to see, Parks Canada that is, if any bridges along that highway have been affected. So not just structures we're looking at, but overall, what is the damage? That's the question.
All right, Sam, thank you.
Thank you.
It's now been 3 days since the exodus from Jasper, about 25,000 people having to pick up and leave on a moment's notice. And for those who call Jasper home, their futures have grown even more uncertain. Kyle backs now with how they're coping and how others are trying to help.
Still coming to grips with a wildfire tearing through their community, reality is starting to set in for evacuees.
I've been seeing a lot of pictures I didn't really want to see. Now everything is gone and I don't know what to do.
Take the time to decompress, think, and breathe.
Mourning what Jasper and the national park meant to them and how much is now reduced to rubble.
It's horrible. Like, it's just heartbreaking. We are such a strong community there, so it's like, it's really painful to see all of this happening.
About 25,000 fled in a late night evacuation on Monday. By Wednesday evening, the wildfire roared into the town site, wicked winds and scorching temperatures creating towering flames.
We're playing it moment to moment. Our children have a million questions.
So sad to know that so many families and people have not just lost their belongings, but their livelihood and their beautiful park.
Exhausted and in a state of shock, many have turned to evacuation centers. The city of Calgary briefly closed its building on Wednesday as numbers dwindled. As more evacuees arrived, there was no help available.
I apologize sincerely. I can only imagine what it must have been like to have to rapidly evacuate and then drive 12 to 15 hours to show up here and be met with closed doors.
The center reopened overnight and will remain for the next 2 days.
We're seeing in the evacuees that are arriving now are typically a younger population that's working in Jasper that drove themselves here, and they need some accommodation.
Alice Varshowske left her Jasper home in a hurry, not realizing she may never return. She just learned her home was burned.
If I break down now, what will I do? I will just sit and cry and nothing's going to change, right?
Kyle, the Premier says that the rebuild's going to take a long time, keeping people out of their homes for a significant amount of time.
Well, several years of effort is how long it took to rebuild other communities devastated by wildfires in the past, like Fort McMurray here in Alberta and Lytton in British Columbia. For now, at evacuation centers like this one here in Calgary, the focus is on providing the basics: food, water, clothing, baby formula, pet food, items to help in the short term. Ian, trying to provide some comfort to evacuees during this incredibly difficult time.
All right, Kyle Bax in Calgary tonight. As you saw in Sam's story, Alberta's Premier is one of many across the province grieving the devastation in Jasper. During an emotional news conference, Danielle Smith described the scope of what's been lost.
For many generations, the town of Jasper and the park surrounding it have been a source of pride. With some of the most beautiful scenery in the entire in the world. Our grandparents visited to experience the majesty of this place with its mountains and lakes and meadows. They took our parents, who then took us to this special spot that they'd spent time in as children. And now we take our own kids and our own loved ones and visitors from around the world to feel that same feeling that you get with your first glimpse of the mountains on the horizon. A feeling that even though you've just left home, you're coming home.
As the Premier described it so well, there is something special about Jasper for millions of visitors who go to experience its natural beauty. Among those visitors, movie stars and royalty. But as Lindsay Duncombe tells us, there is a lot of worry that some of that rich history might be lost.
This place is unbelievable.
Every year, more than 2 million tourists visit Jasper. There's something about the place that is so essentially Canadian. Just ask forest ecologist Phil Burton. That's a 1970s-era selfie at the park. This last year with his grandson.
Interesting that places like that can feel both like home and like a special event.
Jasper is named for a voyageur who ran the trading post. The fur trade brought settlers. The railway brought tourists.
This Mirror of the Gods is a highlight of Jasper National Park.
The iconic views magical even in old-school black and white. In the Second World War, Jasper was home to a secret project, a failed attempt to make an aircraft carrier from ice. Hollywood came for the scenery. Marilyn Monroe stayed at the Jasper Park Lodge, the same fancy hotel that more recently hosted Queen Elizabeth and...
It's literally like the clearest water ever.
You really can't be sad here, honestly.
Joey, we're in Jasper!
the reality TV dating competition, The Bachelor. The hotel says its structures appear to be okay, but history buff Craig Baird is worried iconic buildings may be gone.
When something like this happens, if something burns down, the history remains, like the stories of those places remain, but the ability to touch that history, to be within the walls of a church or a building or a hotel that has existed for decades, that's gone forever.
There are worries about the land, too. Indigenous people were kicked out of their traditional territory to make way for the park. Alberta Métis leader Kayla Mitchell took this photo visiting Jasper last year.
You know, that's where our ancestors were, and a lot of there's grave sites there, there's homesteads there, you know, that's where our people come from.
Land will rejuvenate, buildings rebuilt. But what happened in Jasper is a loss shared by so many. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Joining us again tonight is the Mayor of Jasper, Richard Ireland. I can't imagine, Mayor, how difficult a 24 hours this has been for you. How are you doing this evening?
Well, not as well as I had hoped. Just listening to your story and your other guests and the Premier describe their reaction, and it is unfathomable. It is so appreciated by myself and by our community members that others are able to express that love for Jasper and that shared loss. But as the Premier, I think, said and said so correctly, it is just a different level for those of us who have and who do call Jasper home. It is just such a tremendous loss. I'm sorry, I'll collect myself, but it's so difficult to hear others speak of our town in that sense, and it's not at all that we're disrespectful. We appreciate the sentiment that's expressed, but I have to say that as a third generation Jasperite, it's unbearable.
Yeah, well, you have no apologies that you need to make to anybody. It's, you know, I think people across the country, but particularly people in Lytton and Slave Lake and Fort McMurray and West Kelowna, you know, at least in those communities, really have an understanding of what you and other people are going through. Have you had a chance to speak to others from Jasper who have also, evacuated? What are they saying to you?
Unfortunately, I'm away from the community as well. I've landed at my son's farm. You can see my office now is my granddaughter's bedroom with little twinkly lights behind me. And I haven't been able to get away from here to go and meet people. I'm not too far from Calgary, and I hope to make a trip in there to meet evacuees at the center there. Our residents have dispersed across a broad swath of Western Canada, throughout Alberta and into BC. So it's difficult. So I use opportunities like this, for which I am so thankful you offer, as a method of reaching out to our residents who are displaced, as I say, in places I perhaps am not even aware of.
In Jasper, maybe you have a better sense, but let me ask you this. I talked about those other towns in Western Canada that have been devastated by wildfires. They've gone through the shock and the grief, but also the resilience and in many cases the rebuilding. What do you think the next few months are going to be like for Jasper?
Well, I find reason and cause to be somewhat buoyed and optimistic, and I'm doing my best to express that to the community. I am so relieved to know that there are structures remaining, including homes and businesses, which means that over time, as we assess the situation and ensure that we have the critical infrastructure in place, people will be able to re-enter, get back into their homes, start their businesses again, resume their livelihoods, although in certainly a limited fashion. But my thought is that if there are homes for some, there is community for all. We will find opportunities to come together physically and, of course, emotionally and spiritually, and we will demonstrate the inherent strength of our community, and we will rebuild that town.
I've always been impressed by the way so many mayors rise to the occasion and speak on behalf of their community, and you certainly have been doing that. Mayor Ireland, thank you very much for speaking with us again this evening.
Well, I appreciate those kind words, Ian. I, again, appreciate the opportunity, and I do regret that I'm a bit of a blubbering mess. It's just, as you appreciate, such a tremendously difficult time.
Well, you're
profound sadness for our entire community, and I have the honor of trying to express that and keep us together, and I'm so happy that you've provided an opportunity to do that.
We appreciate your eloquence, Mayor. Thank you. Another Rocky Mountain town is being threatened by flames tonight. An out-of-control wildfire is burning just south of the community of Golden on the BC side of its border with Alberta. That fast-moving fire jumped a river overnight, burning at least 6 rural homes. An evacuation order has now been issued for about 100 properties, while 1,200 others remain on alert. But officials say a cool down in the weather is working in the favor of fire crews. Cooler temperatures combined with intermittent rain is also helping 300 firefighters battling flames to protect the gold rush era historic site of Barkerville and the nearby town of Wells. There are currently more than 400 wildfires burning in BC. More than half are deemed out of control. Not far from here, those fires are still burning inside Jasper National Park. We'll be back with more special coverage in just a few minutes.
First, though, we are in Paris again tonight on the eve of the Olympics opening ceremony. So security is tight, the stage is set, and this city is promising to put on a show like never before. But even before the official start of the games, scandal overshadows Canada's women's soccer team.
No matter how they perform, how they do at this Olympics, as defending gold medalists, they've lost.
We're back from Paris in 2.
Breaking news from Paris tonight, the Canadian Olympic Committee has removed the head coach of the women's national soccer team. The COC says it took the decision after Canada Soccer suspended Bev Priestman. All of this after Canada was caught using a drone to spy on the New Zealand team practice, then beating New Zealand in its first match earlier today. Thomas Dagla is here with more on this developing story. And Thomas, what are officials saying about this removal?
Canada Soccer is just stopping short, Ian, of saying that the head coach of the women's national team, Bev Priestman, must have or should have known that there's been spying going on for some time. Canada Soccer's CEO and General Secretary Kevin Blue released this statement distancing himself from any advanced knowledge. He said, over the past 24 hours, additional information has come to our attention regarding previous drone use against opponents predating the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. In light of these new revelations, Canada Soccer has made the decision to suspend women's national soccer team head coach Bev Priestman. And he says that suspension will remain in place through the Olympics and at least until what Canada Soccer calls an independent external review of all this has wrapped up, Ian.
And what else can you tell us about this past drone use?
Well, a coach who's been involved in Canada Soccer in the past told me today, in his words, this was common knowledge, and it was talked about openly that the National Soccer Federation used drones to collect intelligence on opponents. We reported last night that there were questions 3 years ago about a drone flying over the Honduran men's team's training session here in Toronto at the time. This week, the analyst believed to have been flying that drone to spy on the New Zealand women's team. We've now learned he was part of the staff for both former men's coach John Herdman and the women's coach Bev Priestman. So questions about who knew about all this and when will only grow louder now, Ian.
Thomas Dagla reporting in Toronto. Well, now it's over to Adrian. She is in Paris on the eve of the official start to the Games.
The iconic Arc de Triomphe in a city tonight that is full of anticipation. The opening ceremony of Paris 2024 is now just hours away. On the pitch and the track, and especially on the Seine, the site of the opening ceremony, safety and security are top of mind. Thousands of police officers and soldiers are at the ready. Salima Shivji shows us how they and the athletes are gearing up for the big show.
The stage is set with stands begging to be filled, even as some are fussing with the final touches. All ahead of a risky open-air opening ceremony with the world watching. It's a security gamble, and France knows it. Cue the heaviest police presence Paris has seen in times of peace, and an eerie quiet in the barricaded streets. It's more like a fortress than a bustling capital. This massive security operation means more than 1 million people were screened ahead of the Games. Athletes, volunteers, even locals. And more than 4,000 were denied access to this crucial zone near the river.
100% des effectifs disponibles, engagés.
Absolutely every officer available is deployed and working, says this security expert. And every precaution taken. There's too much at stake. Israel's athletes are getting 24-hour protection from elite police squads, the highest security France can provide, with the conflict in Gaza provoking threats. The team's first soccer match deemed high risk went off without any major disruption, a relief for officials who confirmed Israel's plans for the ceremony.
What I can tell you is that the Israeli delegation will participate in the Games, and specifically in the opening ceremony, just like any other delegation.
For other athletes, there's a heady mix of excitement and nervous anticipation ahead of the ceremony.
I think for sure France it's a little bit a target. It's not since today, it's since many years because we are a country of freedom and stuff.
I think that's all out of our control right now, so just have to pray and hope we're safe.
For some other athletes, like Canada's entire swim team, including gold medal favorite Summer McIntosh, sailing in a boat for the opening ceremony is a no-go because it will interfere with their competitions looming fast. Never mind the security alert level, which is the highest possible. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Paris.
CBC is your home for the opening ceremony on Friday, just hours away. I'll be co-hosting alongside Scott Russell. Our special live coverage begins at 1 p.m. Eastern. Now, to get to this point has been a long journey for this bustling city. Years of planning that started in the wake of several horrific attacks on Paris. We'll speak with two survivors about why it is so important to find hope right now. That's coming up in just a few minutes.
But first, we're going to turn back to the news unfolding here in Alberta. Not far from here, businesses, homes are in ashes after a monster wildfire ripped through Jasper. Coming up, we'll break down just how quickly this emergency unfolded, but also we'll hear how so many are now sharing their favorite memories of living in this place. Special coverage continues on The National. Paris 2024 really began in 2015. These Olympic Games awarded on the heels of deadly terror attacks.
We have to move on. We can't let terrorists or terrorism win.
Bataclan survivors tell Adrian what this moment means for them. But first, a wall of flames surges into Jasper, Alberta.
I pretty much know that my house is burned. There's not going to be anything to go back to.
Buildings, homes, and the precious mementos they held lost. Lauren Bird looks at how the past few days unfolded. As the fire moved closer, anxiety was met with action and a flight to safety.
Crews are still working to put out fires that have already destroyed significant parts of Jasper, Alberta.
There's Mom and Dad's house.
Here's how the last few days got us here. It changed quickly Monday night. Strong winds pushed fires from the outskirts of Jasper to within a few kilometers of town.
It's 11:24 Mountain Time. The town of Jasper and the national park now under an evacuation order.
We're just kind of relaxing, and then we heard some sirens at about 6 o'clock. And you don't hear sirens too often in Jasper. They always tell you to be prepared for this stuff. This wasn't a dress rehearsal.
About 25,000 people made their way out of town and the national park.
Last night it got really, really bad. And then the ashes started falling from the sky because we were right in Jasper. It was just crazy, the traffic. It was really hard to get out of there.
By early Tuesday morning, Highway 16, the only open road out of town, was jammed.
There was bumper-to-bumper traffic, and they were only moving about 10 kilometers per a couple hours.
There isn't a campground between here and Calgary right now that has any availability.
While in Jasper and the national park, things only got worse.
One of Canada's most iconic natural and cultural landscapes is on fire.
There are currently multiple wildfires burning within Jasper National Park. This is a dynamic and evolving situation.
Tuesday afternoon, the wildfire south of the town had burned more than 6,000 hectares. By evening, Jasper had been fully evacuated. Authorities say only about 40 people refused to leave.
Police are actively going house to house, to apartments, speaking with these people and encouraging them to leave.
On Wednesday, things didn't let up.
We're going to have strong winds continuing, and we expect that this will increase our fire growth on all flanks.
Authorities say conditions made it nearly impossible to fight the fires. Water bombers were grounded because flying conditions were too dangerous, and heavy equipment had to be pulled for safety reasons. Within 48 hours of its first report Monday night, fire reached the border of Jasper at about 7 p.m. Wednesday evening. Then, as the air quality got even worse, Parks Canada pulled its first responders from the front lines to keep them safe.
Some of the firefighters in the park observed flames 400 feet high.
By Thursday morning, much of the town had suffered serious damage.
For many generations, the town of Jasper and the park surrounding it have been a source of pride. With some of the most beautiful scenery in the entire in the world.
Including buildings like the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge and the Jasper Anglican Church. Just how extensive that damage is still unknown.
As stunning as this was, people in Jasper have long been planning for something like this, including developing a wildfire management program. That was run for years by Dave Smith, a Jasper resident forced to leave this week, and I spoke to him earlier this evening. So Dave, you and your family have evacuated to Invermere, BC, not too far from Jasper. How are you all doing this evening?
We are pretty good given the circumstances. Good to hear that there was rain today in Jasper. To be honest, we're all pretty much a little bit numb just because of the lack of information that's flowing our way. We did get a pretty decent update from Parks Canada not too long ago. But the issue, of course, is we don't know if we will be going back to Jasper to a home or going back to Jasper to rebuild.
And I would think making it all that tougher is the social media speculation about what's happened, video, some of it verified, some of it not verified. How are you managing to handle all of that?
That is, you've hit the nail on the head, and I've been telling a lot of people just that. It is social media. We got to recognize that there are parts of social media that do come across and are factual, but there's also a lot of speculation that's out there, along with various videos that are being taken. I'm not sure why they're being taken by fire brigade people. I would think they should be working rather than taking videos, but we're seeing quite a bit of a video of the devastation. So from my point of view, that doesn't help. That's a hindrance, especially since we're not sure what is happening to our particular properties right now.
You were the warden at Jasper Park National Park for quite a while, so you probably have an interesting perspective on this. What is it that makes and has made Jasper so vulnerable to this wildfire?
Well, I was I was one of a number of wardens. My position was the fire and vegetation specialist, so I did have. I like to think I had my finger on the pulse of what was going on in the park when I was working, and things have changed dramatically from the beginning of that time until now. A couple of things, of course. Used to be we'd get maybe 1 or 2 days of 30-degree temperature a year. Now we get 2 to 3 weeks in a row, which we've just gone through. Likewise, we also, our forests are getting old, and a lot of our forests have died because of the mountain pine beetle issue that was plaguing the area between the early 2000s up to about 2015, 2018. So now we created a perfect storm. And then the other night when all we needed is the spark with the high temperatures, low relative humidities, and all we needed is spark. And then the winds picked up, and it's pretty amazing that the authorities were able to get 25,000 people out of the town site through one small highway. So kudos to everybody who did the work. And of course, we always talk about how great the firefighters are and the other first responders, and our hearts go out to them for all their good work as well.
Yep. We won't lose sight of that headline, all those people getting out safely, and I hope that you get news soon on your home, and I hope the news is good. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and I hope the same thing.
Up next, we're back from Paris, where security is so tight. The opening ceremony just hours away. The city's journey to the Games began in the wake of some of its darkest moments.
We have to move on. We can't let terrorists or terrorism win.
From terror attacks to welcoming the world, the city's determination to write its own story. Next. The spotlight turns on Paris. The Olympic opening ceremony is only a few hours away. The security presence is swelling. The details have all been attended to. And hopes here are certainly sky high, not only for a magical and joyful Olympic Games, but a safe one in a city that knows the stakes all too well. That's because terror has visited this place and these people more than once. In 2015, multiple terror attacks were carried out, killing well over 100 people. But something else happened that year, too, that led us all to these Olympic Games.
Games wide open. That this would be the motto of Paris 2024, that this would happen at all, astonishing. When you know the story of how this came to be, especially if you know what these men know.
Are you in this picture?
Oh yeah, I always wondered if I was in it, and I never came close to it. I know I was around here. I know he is dead for sure. and I believe he's dead as well.
That's Arthur de Nouveau, a survivor of the hell that happened here at the Bataclan. Olivier Leplot was also there. He's alive, but not unscathed.
I have a tattoo with a metal fist,
Keep on rocking.
Yeah, keep on rocking. You can see a bandage.
From the look of the Band-Aid, it still sometimes bleeds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it won't heal completely, I believe, but yeah, moving on and keep on working.
It was November 2015, a terror attack at the Bataclan Concert Hall in Paris.
Breaking news out of Paris and what, at least at this moment, looks to be a city under terror attack.
90 people were killed there. One of several attacks that horrible night that all told killed 130. And it came just months after a winter of 2015 attack that terrorized Paris over 3 days.
Dramatic new footage of the moment the Charlie Hebdo terrorists staged a gun battle with police.
The gunmen, all affiliated with ISIS. The 17 dead, killed in several places, including the offices of the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo and a Jewish grocery store. So, 2015 was one of the worst years in memory for Paris. And yet, 2015 is the year Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, bid for the Olympics.
Well, Paris is joining the race to host the 2024 Summer Olympic Games.
The city of Paris is on the starting blocks once again, with the 2024 Summer Olympics clearly in its sights.
To decide to invite the world to Paris in the year of such loss and vulnerability was an act of supreme confidence in the resilience of a city.
Paris as host city of the Games of the 33rd Olympiad 2024.
And this is an act of real bravery for a survivor. That's Arthur de Nouveau on Bastille Day carrying the torch right to the Bataclan, that place that haunts, joining those in the quiet crowd, including the father of a young man killed in the attack.
Our memories.
We connected with him before he carried the torch, and he said the nightmare of what happened at the Bataclan is too terrible for him to explain to his young daughter, but carrying the torch would change the story. Paris hosting the Olympics changes the city's story entirely.
I'm curious if you have any sort of awareness of the moment you heard that Paris had been awarded the Games.
I'm very clear about learning it, I guess, in the next few minutes anyway, because it was all over the media, and saying to myself, yes. I mean, we've not been put away from the rest of the world. It's still possible for Paris to host something that big, which means that there is a way out of this. So to me, that was immediately a message of hope.
Imagine the power of that moment after the horror of this one. 9:40 p.m. on November the 3rd, 2015. Eagles of death metal are on stage at the Bataclan. 3 gunmen enter the concert hall. Moments before, Arthur had taken a picture with someone from the opening band. Then he was getting a beer. That's when the gunfire started.
I removed my earplugs, and the sound really sounded like gunshots. And that's where I understood, and I think everyone understood at the same moment, because I was pushed to the floor, you know, by the crowd movement. I did not lie down by myself. I was just pushed on people with people on top of me.
Arthur was at floor level.
Between the wall and the safety barriers at the front was only a narrow passage. So I crawled down there, but a lot of people were standing and I think took bullets for me, which is, you know, still very weird to say after all these years, because, you know, you're going to a concert and it turns into something of a war zone.
Olivier Leplot was upstairs on the balcony.
My wife told me to go on the ground, to get down on the ground, and so we crawled to the emergency exits and went to one of the changing rooms. We stayed in that changing room for about 2 hours before being rescued by the police.
That wasn't the end of it. They still had to get out.
Unfortunately, we had to cross the pit, you know, with all the images you can imagine. They ask us to look on the ceiling just to
Not look at the bodies,
yeah,
just look
not
up?
look at the bodies. Yeah, you can't because you have to watch your steps, of course. So of course, as you can imagine, terrible images in my mind.
Survivors cope with the images of that night very differently. Some want them to go away.
You know, for example, that could be me. Could be. And that's a bit tough to say.
For Arthur, he found himself looking and looking again at these scenes in particular of people escaping to see if he could find himself, to make sure it was real in a way.
I remember when I went into the streets, I looked back inside and there was a pile of people near the door. It's something very strange because, you know, nowadays you see a lot of awful things on Twitter, on the internet, and there's still something very different about seeing a lifeless body and crawling on top of people who are either dead or playing dead. You know, this will remain for life, I guess.
Memories as etched as the names of the dead on the monuments and the commemorative plaques that line the streets outside the Bataclan. These two men didn't know each other before that night, but they work together now for a survivors and family group called Life in Paris, named in English intentionally to signal to the world that Paris still lives. The Olympics, too, carry the same sentiment.
There's still life in Paris, there's still something to be done here. Don't quit on us. And of course, that was a perfect alignment. And I remember, I think I saw Anne Hidalgo a few months later at the commemorations and her saying, yeah, the Olympics are for you. You know, you'll be there and I'll make sure you have a role in it. And that was very important.
Do you feel in your heart that this is a good thing for Paris to be doing?
We have to move on. We can't let, you know, terrorists or terrorism win. I think it's a good thing, especially, you know, in those dark times, to keep on doing what we love to do. Those names, I know them because I know their family, their friends.
Olivier will also have a role. He's a sports journalist, will be covering the games. He's nervous about crowds, is conscious of security, but says he and all of Paris will steel themselves for this moment. They have to, and they have to trust. Interesting thing about Paris, the city has a very old Latin saying, fluctuat nec mercitur, effectively tossed by the waves, but not sunk. In the wake of those 2015 attacks, those words were suddenly everywhere in Paris. There was pride in that defiance then, just as there is enormous pride in the bold move to hold these games now. Paris lives.
And that energy, that resilience will be on full display Friday night when the opening ceremony gets underway. A reminder, I'll be co-hosting alongside Scott Russell beginning at 1 p.m. Eastern. Until then, that is all from the team here in Paris. We will see all of you in just a few hours as the Olympic Games Paris 2024 really kick off.
And the National will be back from Alberta right after the break. In the aftermath of the devastation in Jasper, we heard lots of stories from residents.
Sydney and I were looking at moving in the mid-90s to a place we could afford a home, and then I was in a car accident, and we had 3 children, and Sydney was pregnant with her 4th, and the outpouring of support from the community was just incredible. And at that point, we realized we found the place that we just wanted to stay forever. And people have just always been so great and help each other, and in tough times, it's you like that support network, and that's the part that made Jasper the home that we wanted to be in.
You know, I have so many memories. When I saw the Moline Lodge burning, I was at first devastated. We have a cafe called the Wicked Cup, and the Wicked Cup patio is the largest patio in Jasper, and it's where everyone meets. Everyone from tourists to locals get together every day and sit outside. And I saw that picture of the Wicked Cup in flames, and at first I was sad, but then it just triggered a whole bunch of wonderful memories of hanging out at that coffee bar
I am a member of the fire department in Jasper. It's not just your friends that you know when you go to their homes. It's literally the whole community. You know people by name, and it's such a warm feeling. And to me, that's what Jasper is, and none of that's gone.
We're sad we lost our house. We're hopeful. We're so grateful for everything that we were able to take. We have a really strong community. I've received so much support from so many people, heard of so much support from so many people. We are going to rebuild, and our community is going to be stronger for it.
And so we're all wondering what has happened just down the highway in Jasper, and we hope to bring you more information about that throughout the day tomorrow on CBC News and tomorrow night on The National. Thanks for being with us. I'm Ian Hannah-Mansing. Good night.